And then when you're ready to start investing, plan for retirement, maybe you need a will or a trust, you're getting married, getting divorced, and you need a financial professional. We have top tier financial professionals willing, ready, and able to serve you. We call those our purse strings approved professionals, and Beth Wahlig is one of them. We're so excited to have her on today to start this conversation about socially responsible investing, and we're going to really get into net zero living and sustainable investing. So I'm so excited for today's conversation. But before we dive into all the fun, Beth, could you give us a little intro of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I work as a financial advisor, a wealth advisor at MRA Advisory Group in New Jersey. And I'm also the director of sustainable investing. So, I help a lot of women with their financial plans, but I also try to get women to invest in sustainable investing. I think it's a really important area that people need to look at and decide for themselves. But I do believe it's sort of the new way of investing. I think in 5 years, it won't even be a term. It's just the way that people will be investing. So.
Well, I hope that happens in 5 years. That would be
Good to
amazing. Because sometimes people don't even know about this. So that's why we're having these conversations. We're getting this message out there because it's so important. And so if anyone's tuning in and has questions along the way, you could throw them in the chat and we're happy to answer them. But otherwise, Beth, let me pull up some slides and we can dive in.
Okay. So recently, do the next one. I went on a trip down to Chesapeake Bay. I was in Annapolis, and there's a great little museum there. It's a maritime museum right on the water. And they have these two great exhibits. And so the one basically on the left there is basically what the bay looks like today. It's polluted. It's got tons of plastic. It's got old fisherman net stuff. The one on the right is where it was in 1800. So that was pristine. It had tons of oysters. It had these beautiful big fish. You don't see a lot of big fish in the bay today. And so this is definitely a polluted water that we need to address. The next page sure talks about polluted air. And for me, this is very promising. So the one on the left is actually what Pittsburgh looked like when the steel mills were at full force. Look at the level of pollution in the air there. It's just utterly amazing. And I have basically relatives that grew up, way back then, mostly in the late 1800s. But, Pittsburgh still looked like that back then. And then on the right, this is the bridge that goes over the Allegheny River. People are playing a marathon, and look at the air now today. So, one contrast that we still have a lot to do. This one sort of says we have done a lot. So, I'm very optimistic that we can do a lot in terms of climate change. So if you go to the next page, what can we do? So there's a thing called net zero living. And it talks about the 5 R's. And these are them: reduce, recycle, refuse, reuse, and then rot. So, and most people are like, oh, I can't do this. I can't incorporate this into my everyday living. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't eventually do this in our own lives, we'll never get to net zero carbon goals that we have going way out. And, for me, this was actually a really hard time. I have a daughter, and she got very angry at my husband and I for constantly using plastic to do food storage, and then we'd throw it away. So one of the first things we did was start getting those sort of plastic silicone things that you could store a food, or using old ball jars, Rubbermaid stuff. And so we really have reduced the level of plastic that we use. In terms of the idea of refusing, I think that's a very interesting and mentally a very difficult thing for people to do. But the factor is, do you really need everything that you consume in your everyday life, right? I used to always grab water bottles when I was in like a 7-Eleven or whatever. Now I bring my container, right? And I always just, use water from the faucet and bring it in the car. So I'm not constantly using plastic water and stuff. It's one of the things that really irritates me when we go to airports, because we're not allowed to bring in our containers and they really don't provide anywhere for you to have fresh water. So people are always buying the water bottles. But we should just try to refuse. We should try to say to people, we need, different things where we're not wasting stuff. Recycle. Everybody's town or city has a recycling center. We all sort of do that, but we need to continue to do that. And some towns have talked about, and some towns have actually eliminated it, saying it's too costly for them to do it. Well, guess what? It's really costly, all that sort of trash that's sitting on a landfill out in, the rural Pennsylvania that goes from New Jersey. New Jersey puts its waste all in Pennsylvania these days. Reuse. We can all reuse things. And I think the younger generation is really good about going to vintage stores, rebuying clothes, rent the runway. We don't need
It's
to
my
buy
favorite places to hang out.
We don't need to be buying a brand new dress for a wedding. We can just go, we can just basically rent it. So I think that's a really, the younger generation's gotten much more used to it than my generation about reusing things, which is great. And then the whole rot concept is basically composting. I don't know if people know about composting, but it's just taking your waste outside, putting it in a bin, and just basically, as it recycles, it becomes almost like a fertilizer and you can use it for your gardens. So all of these things are a way to do it. And, there's basically a thing called the zero waste box. You can go look it up. It's a great way to get started with all these sort of, 5 R's. And so I recommend people to do that and think about it. And so why am I talking about this net zero living? You're like, well, whatever, Well, it's a way for us to get to a carbon neutral world. And eventually, if we don't start doing this stuff right now, we're all going to be forced to do these types of things. So if you go to the next one, everybody sort of knows about the Paris Treaty that was done. But recently, there was the Glasgow Climate Pact that was done in November 2021. And that was basically 197 countries got together. And they basically pulled, papers together that they all agreed to, different articles, and they decided that this is the decade of climate action and support. And what they're trying to do is reduce carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. And they hope to get to net zero through their emission reduction plans by 2050. And, that's very ambitious, but if we don't, we're going to start seeing a lot of climate change, different weather stuff happening. We're going to see flooding, with the oceans, with the water level rising. So it's definitely something that we have to do. It's not something that we need to do. And I don't think a lot of people really realize about the Glasgow Climate Pact. I will say today, that the United Nations just put out their paper. And so you can read it. NBC actually has, NBC News has a really good article out there. And this is done by scientists and they've studied the stuff over the last 5 years about how we can get to net zero. And a lot of it incorporates the same information right here. So, I'm excited about it. A lot of people are very negative, but I'm very excited because I see a lot of different players getting involved in this. It's individuals, it's government, it's also colleges, universities. Stanford University now has a climate initiative school, started a sustainability school. Columbia also has another one and starting to become a major. So very, very interesting. So then get to the next. So there's a thing, I should say a thing. There's a plan out there. This is relatively new within the past 2 years, and it's called Speed and Scale Plan. And this was developed by John Doerr and a bunch of people at Kleiner Perkins, which is an investment consulting firm. And the point of this it's basically a plan to take action. And it's basically looking at how to unlock a cleaner, safer, and healthier future. And so the plan has basically 10 initiatives that we all need to concentrate on. So, one of us, we all aren't going to do all 10 of them, but this is sort of the plan that everybody needs to sort of focus in on. And what I think is really great about it is it gives you a guide and steps to take. A lot of time we just talk about we need to tackle climate change, but how do we do it? Really do it. And you can go on, it's speedandscale.com, and basically you can it's free. All the information is free on there. There's also a book out there, but most of the information you can just go on and read for yourself. So on the left side, the emissions, these are the things we can do about the pollution that's in the air, in the water issues. We can electrify transportation. We can decarbonize the grid. There's now technology where we can actually take the carbon out of the air. We can fix the food chain, the supply for food chain, use less waste, use more plant-based foods, protect nature. We don't need to be tearing down forests. We need to be protecting them. We need to be protecting open spaces too. Very, very important. I think John Doerr says that this one, number 5, cleanup industry, is the toughest. Mm-hmm. Because most industries don't really want to be bothered with this. But this is something that's absolutely critical. And he says that what we need to do is incentivize industries to do this. And matter of fact, the Inflation Reduction Act that was done last year does have tax credits to address this exact issue. Wow. And then removing the carbon from the air. We had sort of talked about that. And then there's these accelerants. These are the positive things we need to do. We need to, establish different types of policies. We have to move into taking steps and actions. We have to continue to innovate. And, that's really critical. A lot of scientists are now doing tons of studies about what different types of metals we can use to electrify cars, so we're not so dependent on lithium. So we need to continually innovate to get to a net zero world. And the last part, which I'm most passionate about, we need to invest. It's called climate change financing. And we need to put our dollars towards this in a very, very positive way. And one of the things about the Glasgow Climate Pact was they established $100 billion. $100 billion. So the developed countries basically said that we will put this together to help the undeveloped countries, basically, countries in Africa, South America, with their financing, because a lot of them say we can't afford it. Right. So it's really an agreement between all of these countries as steps forward so that we can invest. So what can basically what can you and I do? So what can Maggie do? What can Beth do? What can I do? And so the next page, at MRA Advisory Group, we do a lot of sustainable investing, and we have model portfolios. You can see our model portfolio. It's right on our, basically, right on, you can go right to our site, and you can see that under the investing tab. But what I'm sort of proposing here to you is not an individual portfolio. So I'm not trying to tell you that. What I'm trying to do here is give general themes that you can think about investing in. And that it's basically based on those climate change initiatives, that we had talked about with the Glasgow Climate Pact and also the speed and scale plan. So, overall sustainable goals, we should definitely be investing in those companies that are addressing environmental, social, um, and governance characteristics. I just couldn't think of the third one. Big blank. So the way they call it ESG investing. So this particular one, DSI, is really looking at S&P 500 companies and selecting those that really do positive ESG characteristics. So that's a more diversified type of ETF that you could invest in. Solar innovation is very, very critical. And I think the US has really, really stepped up. And, you can see a lot of solar panels on people's houses. I think eventually that's just going to be the way to, electrify your home. And so there is an ETF called TAN, not a bad name, TAN. And it invests in a lot of the companies that are involved in the solar industry, and not just the ones putting panels. It's all the ones who do all the technology to make those panels to put up there, as well as sort of the way that the sun takes in within the panel and then generates the electricity. So there's lots of different ways, and there's also companies that do solar farms. So it's a pretty diversified ETF. Water resources. I've been investing in water resources for, I don't know, six or 7 years for now. It's such a vital piece of our economy, and most people never even think about investing in it. And so this particular ETF, PHO, basically invests in those companies that provide products and services in water to basically have clean water for all of us to utilize. And so there's a number of companies in there. There's a number of water utility companies in there, but there's also companies who do the water meters, calculate the water meter when you come to your house. So all of that is very, very critical. The next one I'm really excited about. I've been in conversation. There's a company that just started this ETF. It's called EATV. And it's VegTech Plant-Based Innovation ETF. So it's really looking at how we can innovate our food supply chains, have more plant-based foods, sort of eliminate, we have this concentration of having a lot of meats in our diet. I'm not saying everybody should be a vegetarian, but we do need to reduce our meat consumption. Animals provide a lot of the carbon that goes up in the air. People don't really think about it, but cows are big generators of carbon induced pollution. And so this is a new ETF. It is a global ETF. So it's looking at like companies all over the globe. So just an example is they invest in Del Monte Fresh Foods. So they're investing in a company that's very fruit-based, doing a lot of innovation. And so that's sort of an example of a great investment that you can do there. So renewable and clean energy. This particular one I called FAN looks at one segment of the renewable energy one. And I really like this one. This is really focused on wind energy ETF. And actually, it's very difficult to invest in individual stocks in wind energy because a lot of them are European based. So you can't necessarily do it, in a U.S. domestic type of stock portfolio. So this gives you the option of being able to do that. So Ørsted, which is a Norwegian company and the largest wind energy manufacturer of equipment, is in this ETF. So, that's a great way to get involved in sort of the wind farms. I mean, basically solar energy and wind energy are going to be major players. And there's lots of tax incentives out there for basically both governments and businesses working together to do sort of those wind farms. And they're starting, you'll see them when you have ever been in California, you see the wind farms.
There's some in like in Illinois, Iowa area. It's a big wind farm. Yeah.
And then, so sometimes you see it in land, but a lot of times you're seeing it now out on the coast too. And they're starting to have them out on the coast of New Jersey too. And a lot of that times it's both a business and government all tied together to get that stuff done. But it is a very clean way of producing energy. And then the last one I talk about is carbon reduction, which is so critical for us to do. And this last ETF that I have here that you can invest in, ICLN, basically is invest in 100 companies that are involved in renewable energy. So it is a very diversified way for you to sort of get started. And it's an ETF that's actually performed very well over the last 5 years. I mean, people don't think about investing in a lot of these different funds because they don't think they'll perform well. But this particular ETF has performed very well. And one of the top holdings in it is a company called Enphase Energy. And that's basically a company that's providing technology for the solar energy industry. Wow. And it's based out in California in the San Francisco Bay Area. So anyhow, these are all different ways that you can get invested in climate change initiatives. And I really think that going forward, a lot of people really should start thinking about ways that they can change their lives to do those 5 R's in in ways they've never had to do before. I know for me initially it was very difficult, but I I do a lot of the different stuff. And I recently did put an order in for an electrical vehicle. So that's a big one for me. But I also think you can use your own dollars to get invested in this market. And and in a way, you'll also get returns both monetarily and also, personally. Because I think we will benefit, will be a lot healthier if our environment is cleaner. So,
definitely. Let me pull up your last slide here, but I think, that's what, excuse me, that's one of the things I love about this, and, socially responsible investing is that we can do the smaller actions at home, making sure you're recycling or, using glass containers or things like that. But it's like, I don't need to invest into Amazon or into Home Depot. I can send that money where it's going to be used, make the environment better, make the next generation better, and still get those investments back. That's wild. Right. I mean, to me, like, I know we're always focused on women, but that's such a woman thing, is to have everything always like helping everybody at every touch point. And to me, that's using your money to the absolute maximum, is like making sure that it's helping today, it's helping tomorrow, it's helping generations, but you're also getting those investments back. It's not like you're missing out because you're not spending that with Amazon or Home Depot or something like that.
And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about sustainable investing. I mean, there's a lot of, political stuff going on right now, but I think you should ignore that because these are the facts. These have been proven scientifically that we are having detrimental impact because we are not addressing climate change. We're having, increased weather conditions. We're having more fires. We're having flooding, all of that type of stuff. And we really need to reduce carbon emissions. And what's really great is that there's a lot of dollars going towards that right now. There's a ton of investments by governments, by corporations, and you should participate in that. with your dollars. I don't recommend as an advisor that you just do a whole sustainable investment portfolio unless that's extremely your passion. But I do recommend that people take a portion, of their funds and start investing in it. And I think that you will see, 5 and 10 years from now, there will be significant returns in this particular, segment of investment. And like I said earlier on, I think 10, 15 years from now, we're not even going to be talking about sustainable investing because it's going to be the way to invest.
I sure hope so. I sure hope so. Because it's a big stance with your money. It's really putting your money where your values are, where your beliefs are, and where you want your future to be. And so if people were to work with you, if they wanted to start, doing some of these investments, how does that process kind of work?
So we do, ours is very thematic. Like I had put there the themes. A lot of people do ESG investing. It's just more like rating companies based on ESG factors. So we don't really, we do some of that, but primarily we work on themes. So I basically sit down with my clients and we have a value-based questionnaire that they do. They basically answer 20 questions and then we can see where they think different areas they would like to invest in. Like for sustainable investing, I'm talking a lot about climate change, but we had previously talked, there's a whole other part about the social responsible. Right. So the female empowerment stuff, racial justice, that's a whole other area too. So, it's really based on your value system, what you feel is most important to you. And then basically we take that information and we put together a customized investment portfolio for you. And we rebalance that, as needed, because obviously different areas will have different returns. So it's not just values based, it's also looking at different parts of the market where we feel you're going to get performance. But you can integrate that value system in your investing. And I think for a lot of people, when they take that sort of personal piece of themselves and they see it reflected, in their portfolio, they get a little bit more excited about finance and investing, because otherwise it gets pretty dry, right?
Yeah.
And in doing that values-based investing, we also do the risk management piece of it too. So, we're constantly looking at your portfolios and making sure whatever type of investor you are, whether you're conservative, you're willing to take moderate risk, or you're really aggressive, we can still structure the portfolio to address that and still do sustainable investing. So there's all different pieces of it, but it can really be customized, which I think is really cool today. I could say probably 15 years ago, you couldn't do that. There's a lot of third-party software technology out there where you can really look at your portfolios and examine what you're invested in, and monitor those investments and really, make sure the companies are really walking the talk.
Yeah.
And then also making sure that you're not getting the risk of those portfolios isn't, way out there. So all of those things are really important.
And when we have all these moving parts, I'm always like, this is why you have a professional. You don't need to figure all that out on your own or do all of this in it. But it's also not like one cookie cutter answer. Like, yes, invest in this because, like you said, we have that risk management. We have that, kind of what's most important, or our belief, our values, as well as just like what's our goal with this money. And so that's why I love having a professional just to kind of talk to and work with, so you could figure out all those moving parts, because we're not cookie cutter. It's not one, straightforward answer.
Yeah, and you should match yourself up with a financial advisor that basically has your same value system.
Right.
But there's a lot of financial advisors that just are not involved in sustainable investing and stuff. For me, it's a passion of mine, and it does take a lot of research. So it's not something that, you're going to just find on a website, right? Googling it. You're just not. There's just so many moving parts with this. So that last page that I provided to you, that's free information for everybody who's on this podcast, but that that's something I took, I know what's in each one of those ETFs, and I
Wow.
wouldn't put it up in that page unless I sort of, have utilized them in my portfolios.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of ETFs out there that say they are green that are not. And so you do have to really be careful about it. So that's another reason why to have an advisor who really understands this particular area.
100%. Yeah. You always have to figure out, the real and the fake after a while. But you can really tell that you're an expert in this area. And it's also like you're super passionate about, which I love to see, because it's more than just making money, but kind of changing the world as we go and making it better for generations to come.
I mean, I've learned probably one thing that I've done in the past year that's really been critical is I've gone to a lot of conferences and symposiums with scientists, because they are really the people that are leading this. There's a lot of Earth Institutes at different universities and colleges, and they're coming up with very innovative ways that are eventually going to translate into the investment community. So you really need to be, understand the trends that are out there and the different players that are involved. But for me, it's such a positive thing to see that there's so much happening. We're not at a standstill. And a lot of the scientists say that we are making progress. I know you read about in the paper that you think that we're not making any, but actually we are. And that a lot of that has to do with companies addressing their pollutions, their emissions of pollutions. Also, the electrification of vehicles is going to be a huge thing in 5 years. So we've had a lot of companies that have not been able to produce as quickly. But, with the Inflation Reduction Act, we are going to see major battery plants here in the United States, and they're actually being built right now.
Oh, wow.
So in 2 to 3 years, you're going to see a lot more electrical vehicles on the road. And, just around me, one of the big things for me is being I put in an order for an electrical vehicle. It's like, well, is there stations around me?
Right.
And then actually I went on, and you can Google it.
Yeah.
And you will literally, there's 5 different charging stations around.
There's more than you would expect once you start looking around. I feel like they're always at like Costco and Sam's Club and different things like that.
And one of the, I got finally made the decision. I was very hesitant about the electrical vehicle thing.
It's a big jump.
Yeah, it's a big thing. But my daughter bought one out in California, and she absolutely loved it. And guess what? If you own a electrical vehicle out, she lives in Los Angeles, you can drive in that left lane.
Oh, yeah.
You have to have 2 or more people, right, for commuting. If you have an electric vehicle, you can just go.
Love it. There you go.
So that's a huge incentive for people to
especially if you're traveling in LA.
Yeah.
Priceless.
Yeah. So anyhow, there's all different ways we can get ourselves involved in this climate change initiatives.
I love it. I'm excited for people to jump in, just to be part of this conversation and kind of be in the know. Is there anything else we didn't touch on today that you want to make sure to share before we sign off?
No, I mean, I would just really encourage people there's United Nations just put out this huge report, and I know it's very thick, but I would encourage people. It's right there. It's free. It's right on their website. Download it, read it, get educated about it. And then the other thing that I would really do is the speed and scale plan. I think, it's very simple, but there's a great website for it. And, just take the time to read it. Just get educated on it. And I think the more educated you are, the more excited you're going to be.
Definitely. I'm excited to go give it a look. So thank you again, Beth, for tuning in today.
Maggie, thank you.
Yeah, it was great tips about, just socially responsible investing. So if you are wanting to reach out to Beth, her email's been going through the bottom, bpwahlig@mraadv.com. Otherwise, you can reach out to her on our site, pursestrings.co. And yeah, let's just get started. Let's start saving the world.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye.